अधिवक्ता परिषद की एडवाइजरी कमेटी के मेंबर्स भी हैं और इस आयु में भी वो काफी फुर्तीले और सक्रिय रहते हैं और संगठन में हमें उनके बैठकों में उनका मार्गदर्शन मिलता रहता है। हम उनकी दीर्घायु और वो हमेशा स्वस्थ रहें इसकी कामना करते हैं। नाउ द टुडेज टॉपिक इज Supreme Court judgment on Permanent Commission of Women Officers in Indian Army and Navy and its impact on gender justice. And to discuss the topic, we have Ms. Aishwarya Bhati ji with us. She is a senior advocate in Supreme Court of India and also additional advocate general for state of UP in Supreme Court. The most important thing is she argued for women army officers in the petition before the court. We welcome you, ma'am, to our online studio.
Thank you, Ankita ji.
हटा दो सब बाधाएं मेरे पथ की, मिटा दो आशंकाएं सब मन की, जमाने को बदलने की शक्ति को समझो, कदम से कदम मिला के चलने दो मुझको. On 17 February 2020, the Apex Court delivered the landmark judgment and granted permanent commission to women officers in Army and in Navy. The court held that women officers cannot be denied the right to equal opportunity and dignity entitled under the Constitution on the ground of biology, motherhood, and physical attributes. The court scrapped the statutory bar on giving permanent commission and directed the center to grant permanent commission to short-served commission officers within 3 months. So now the time is running and more than 10,000 viewers are waiting to hear Aishwarya ma'am. Now I request Aishwarya ma'am to commence her lecture. Over to you, ma'am.
Many thanks, Ankita ji. And my warm good evening and namaskar to everyone who has taken out the time to join the webinar today. It is indeed a huge privilege to be involved with intellectual activity in the COVID times that we are living in. This is a really, really challenging time. And before I start my webinar, I must compliment the team of the young team of the COVID warriors with Adhivakta Parishad. I think these warriors have done an incredible job in having these web series and having the kind of reach that we have. I think it's wonderful that I believe that we are on multiple platforms together at the same time, Facebook, YouTube, etc. So my commendations to the team, and my warm welcome to all my colleagues from across the country, law students and members of the bar, seniors, juniors, fellow members. I think it's incredible that we can connect in times like this and we can have some intellectual discussions and intellectual one-to-one meetings and webinars like this. So coming to the topic that has been assigned to me, I think it was only natural to give me this topic because I did have the privilege of representing the women officers in the Army and Navy cases. In fact, also in the Air Force case, but we only have judgments in the Army and the Navy case. Air Force case, the hearing is still not complete and it is pending. So to just give you a little idea of the facts of the matter, I will start with the Army case. It is entitled Babita Punia. So the journey of the battle for permanent commission of women officers in the Indian Army actually started in the year 2004-2005 when a PIL was filed actually by one of the juniors of the ladyship, Rekha Palli madam, as her lordship then was a practicing lawyer. So Babita Punia was the lawyer who was in the office of Ms. Palli, who started this litigation. Of course, subsequently, many officers joined in, and this became not just a PIL, but writ petitions, substantive writ petitions, where the officers themselves who were involved and who were affected by it came before the Honorable Court. This series of matters that ultimately got together finally culminated in the Delhi High Court by a judgment of Honorable Justice Sanjay Kishan Kaul, as his lordship then was in the Delhi High Court, on 12th of March 2010. So this is almost a decade-old fight, a battle that we got a judgment in the Delhi High Court in March 2010, and the judgment in the Supreme Court has come almost a decade later in 2020. What is important in brass facts to understand is that till 1991, 1992, there was no women who were taken in the armed forces in India, apart from the medical field. So we had women who were doctors and nurses in the medical field, which is the Army Medical Corps, but women officers were not taken in any other arm in the Indian Army, or for that matter, the Indian Air Force or the Navy. It started off as an experimental basis. It started in 1991. A notification was issued with the consent of the President of India, and women were taken in. But initially, they were taken in on experimental basis, in limited numbers, and only in limited streams. So they were not taken in all the streams which are open and available to the gentlemen officers of the Indian Army. This initially, when they were taken in, it was sought to be a experimental basis, but it was like they would gradually open more fields for them, because this is a battle we have seen across the world. In fact, just to give you a little perspective of the world also, because we did a lot of research while arguing these matters and presenting our cases before the Honorable Supreme Court. So just to give you a historical perspective, it was very interesting, because women were not used or not allowed in the military anywhere else in the world till the First and the Second World War. In fact, it was the First World War and thereafter the Second World War, or sometimes some intermittent wars in between, that women were taken in to augment the forces which were already there. And in fact, there is a very interesting documentary of the History Channel, which actually takes us even farther back, that women were actually taken only either as nurses or as honey traps. So they were used in military for that strategic honey trapping kind of a business. Of course, all this was on at least 2 centuries back. But it has been even from the First World War, Second World War, their performance was noticed. And thereafter, they were slowly taken into military forces in some of the developed countries. Some of the countries, of course, we know that some of the countries, women have been performing for several decades now. Israel, France, United States of America, United Kingdom. These were some of the countries that were forerunners in inducting women in the military, and thereafter even assigning them combat roles. Now, coming back to the Indian scenario, the battle before the case and the battle before the Indian courts were with regard to granting permanent commission to women officers. So, though women were taken in from 1991 and 1992 onwards, but actually they were taken in only as short service commissioned officers, and they were not granted permanent commission. I must also explain a little bit the difference, because short service commission is a commission which is usually 5 years, extendable to 5 and more years, and then 4 years. So 14 years in the Army, and about the similar period in the Navy and the Air Force also. So, but the permanent commission is a commission which is permanent, and for that, the person serves right up to their age of superannuation. Now, age of superannuation also varies in the military, in the Army and the other armed forces, on the basis of the rank that a person is holding. So the superannuation actually starts for officers from 52 and 54 years of age, and then goes up to the chief of the staff, of course, is the highest retirement age. But that is the battle that was there, that women were taken in for short service commission. So initially 5 years, they were all given the extension for 5 more years, and then given one more extension of 4 years. So they were all working for 14 years plus, but they were not granted permanent commission. The Honorable Delhi High Court in March 2010 was very scathing and very emphatic in its judgment, and it's a very forward-looking judgment of that time, where in no uncertain terms, the Delhi High Court categorically said that the government had itself by then taken a decision to allow permanent commission in 2 of the branches, which was the Education Corps and the Judge Advocate General, JAG branch of the Army, and the Army Education Corps, which is AEC. And in Air Force also, the decision was taken. In Air Force and Navy, the decision had been taken in 2006 to allow women to have permanent commission. Of course, these were prospective decisions, but Army had not taken any such decision. There is you may think that why these three services were dealt with separately and why separate judgments were given, but I will explain the nuanced difference that is there. I did have the privilege and the honor of representing really courageous women officers in all of these three cases, Army, Air Force, and Navy. So I will tell you in the course of my webinar the difference between the three. But for now, starting with the Army, dealing with the Army now, I think what was important was that the Army cases, the High Court said that when you have given to two, then you have to give it to all women officers who meet the standard, who make the mark, who are competent enough, who want to serve for permanent commission. And the Delhi High Court actually steered clear of the combat rules. In fact, it was not even an issue. The issue of women in the combat roles was not even raised before the Delhi High Court, and not so before the Supreme Court also. The issue in the Army cases was only about granting permanent commission to women officers in those areas where they were working already as short service commissioned officers. So the question really was, if a woman is good enough to be a short service commissioned officer, if she's good enough to serve the Army for 14 years, then she is good enough to continue till superannuation as a permanent commission officer. That was, in one line, really the crux of the argument in the Army cases. After the splendid and spectacular win of the women officers in the Delhi High Court, the matters were brought up to the Supreme Court by the Union of India. In 2010 and early 2011, several appeals were filed. So the matters which actually were before the Supreme Court were appeals filed by the Union of India against the Delhi High Court judgment. Now, interestingly, at the time of the initial hearing, the Union of India tried to get a stay from the Honorable Supreme Court, but did not succeed in that. And the Honorable Supreme Court said that we are not going to stay it. Only the contempt petitions that had been filed in the meanwhile before the Delhi High Court were stayed at some point by the Honorable Supreme Court. But the judgment of the Delhi High Court of 12th March 2010 was never stayed, and it continued to operate. Now, it is also interesting to know why the matter took such a long time in the Supreme Court. But I have been involved in this matter for several years, so I can tell you that it's not like the matters got lost in the system. We tried at several times. The matters came up for hearing automatically. We also mentioned it at several stages, and we tried to get them up for hearing because they had been lagging for a long time. But every time the Union of India, would make a submission that they were actually considering the matter themselves, and they themselves want to give equal opportunities of permanent commission to women officers, and therefore they would not like the court to pass a judgment, and they would like to take a call and consider it as a policy decision and give that. In any case, we all heard the speech of the Honorable Prime Minister from the Red Fort 2 years back, and as a policy decision, it was decided to grant permanent commission to women officers of the Indian Army, and thereafter notification was issued in February 2019. It's actually 25th February 2019. This notification was issued, which granted permanent commission to women officers in all the 10 fields, 10 arms that they had been as short service commissioned officers. So essentially, you will see that the problem was probably sorted. What was the purpose of then having a judgment, then having a case, and then continuing with this litigation? I think what is important is that the final parts of this judgment actually came to the interpretation of that notification of 25th February 2019. Because it was our assertion, it was our submission before the Honorable Court that while this notification and the policy decision had granted permanent commission to women officers in the Indian Army, however, this had been applied in an arbitrary manner. Essentially, I will tell you there were 2 or 3 aspects of discrimination which we had highlighted before the court. A, Number one, this policy was to apply prospectively. So the policy letter said that this will apply prospectively, which essentially means that women officers who are appointed or enrolled or commissioned after the date of the notification would alone be entitled to the benefit of this notification. That was first aspect that was challenged by us. Of course, and the second, let me just complete that narration first. And the second point of discrimination qua us was that at the time of grant of permanent commission, the circular notification said that it would only be considered in staff appointments. Now, thankfully, I am a Air Force officer's daughter and an Army officer's daughter-in-law, so I do understand a lot of these very specific, parlance and jingos, which are very common in usage in the armed forces. But to explain, I think it's important to simplify that there are two kinds of appointments essentially. One is staff appointments and one is criteria appointments. So to understand in a simplified manner, staff appointments are essentially the non-meteor roles. They're not so significant. They're not leadership positions. Whereas criteria appointments include very significant positions where the designations, the portfolio that is handed over to an officer is extremely significant. And more importantly, it includes the command positions. So to confine women only to staff appointments, while giving them permanent commission, would have essentially rendered them as second-grade citizens even inside the Indian Army. So they would have been rendered as second-grade officers in the Indian Army, and that was a huge pinch, and they would have no scope to really go on to roles that were significant, that were influential, and the roles which were commanding positions. And the third aspect that was of discrimination in this notification was that this allowed women officers to exercise their options only after the third year of after having completed 3 years of commissioning and before they completed the fourth year. Now, this was the third point of discrimination because gentlemen officers are granted options not at one stage. There are gentlemen officers who are taken in as short service commissioned officers also. And they are given options of opting for permanent commission, which is, of course, subject to suitability and merit and also availability of, the service contingency. But the options are available to them at 2 or 3 stages. So that option was not available to women officers. Now, these were the 3 essential things that we had highlighted. The Union of India had filed a note during the course of the hearing before the Honorable Supreme Court. And essentially what the Union of India had highlighted was that the prospectively of the notification would really not apply to not give the option to women who were serving. So let me explain to you at a little more length. The proposal of the Union of India was that women officers who had not completed 14 years of service, which is the maximum term permissible for short service commission. So those women officers would be given an option to opt for a permanent commission. But women officers who had completed more than 14 years of service would not be given any option of getting any permanent commission. They would not even have an option available to them. So therefore, that's how it was read. And one more thing of the proposal was that the women officers who had completed 20 years of service would be given an option they would be retired. They would also not be given an option. They would be retired, but they would be given pension. So 20 years is the minimum pensionable service which is there in the army. So these women had still already served 20 years, so they would be retired with pension. Now, there was a huge lacuna with this, and there was a huge discrimination issue which was there for women officers qua this, because while they had succeeded before the Delhi High Court as far back as in March 2010, which is almost a decade earlier, and there was no stay of that judgment, the Union of India had not complied with that judgment and had come out with the policy decision only in February 2019. And in the meanwhile, these women officers who were working as short service commissioned officers had been continuing as short service commissioned officers. They had been denied promotions. They had been denied the perks of their seniority. They had been denied equal emoluments, which were at par with their seniority. So they had essentially been just made to fester in the organization without getting the dues that that they were entitled to, that they were rightfully entitled to. The Honorable Supreme Court has dealt with this argument in a very scathing manner and completely demolished the arguments that were made by the Union of India, and they completely rejected the proposal that was made, and they said this is not fair. You cannot be not giving an option to the women officers who are serving. So all serving women officers, whether they have completed less than 14 years, more than 14 years, more than 20 years, that classification that was sought to be made by the Union of India, that was completely struck down. And the court has said that equal opportunity and equal options have to be available to women officers who are serving, who are in the Short Service Commission, and they have to be given. Now, interestingly, the court has also taken out given an additional, gone an extra length and given an additional benefit to women officers who had completed more than 20 years of service. And the Honorable Supreme Court says that women officers, if they are not found fit, then they will be, as a one-time measure, because they've been litigating for now 15 years. So they've been in courts. So the court cannot, pendency in the court cannot be putting them into prejudice. Anyways, they've already lost a lot, but as a one-time measure, they will be allowed to complete the pensionable service for women officers who had completed more than 14 years. And of course, women who have completed more than 20 years would, anyways, they have completed the pensionable service. But more importantly, the court has said, without any discrimination, with all consequential benefits, including seniority, which includes promotions, which includes all the emoluments and everything that goes with their seniority. The second aspect of the discrimination, interestingly, that really saw the majority of the battle in this case, it was very interesting, because that note that was handed over to the court at the time of arguments to deny women officers the criteria appointments and the command appointments, and to confine them only to staff appointments, was sought to be justified in an extremely absurd manner, and in extremely it's actually, it runs counter to the times that we live in, and it runs counter to the performance of these extremely brave women officers in the Indian Army. So it was the excuses that were given, which Ankita ji mentioned in the introduction initially at a little preface, were arguments ranging from physiological reasons, physical reasons, biological reasons. Women are lesser, they have more duty towards family, they become mothers, their motherhood duties bind them for a long time, then they have to bring up their children, and their domestic duties and household duties are so much. Very interesting argument was given that the Jawans, mind you, so far the Indian Army don't have any women in the cadre of the soldiers. So women had been in the forces only from in the officers cadre from 91-92 onwards. So they said that the Jawans in the Indian Army, they come from very rustic and very rural background, and they will not be able to accept commands from women officers, and therefore if you give them commanding positions, then the social ethics of our country, the social fabric of our country, the background from which these Jawans come, they will not be able to take orders and commands from, and they will not have the same discipline under a woman commanding the unit. Those were the kind of arguments that were made. There were also some half-hearted arguments made with regard to not having enough infrastructure, even enough logistic issues, etc., to have women at the forward posts. Now, I did have the benefit of being part of a extremely formidable team, both in the Army matters as also the Air Force and Navy matters. We in fact, interestingly, uh, Army matters, it was Madam Minakshi Lekhi and me. We were the two women lawyers who were arguing for the side of the women officers, and for the Navy matters also, where we have a judgment, there was a bunch of women lawyers. In fact, 80% of the lawyers, there were many lawyers who argued in the Navy matters, but 80% of those lawyers were women lawyers who were representing the women officers. So it was interesting to see that. It was, of course, it doesn't have a bearing on the merit of the case, but it was interesting to note and see that. But I must tell you here, needless to say that these arguments were also completely demolished by the Honorable Supreme Court. It was a bench of Honorable Justice Chandrachud and Honorable Justice Ajay Rastogi, and they have come with a very strong and a very landmark judgment. It's a very path-breaking judgment, and it's going to be like a milestone and probably like a lighthouse in the journey of gender justice and gender equality. I think what was significant was, I often tell that to my friends, that I think that note, often in cricket parlance, if one was to speak, you often need a loose ball to hit a boundary. Now, that note and those reasons actually became the loose ball that was thrown at the Honorable Supreme Court. We took full advantage of those completely redundant reasons, and the Honorable Supreme Court also completely rubbished them completely. In fact, what the Honorable Supreme Court has done is they have taken examples of women officers themselves. So we did give exemplary examples of women officers who had been, we were not treading into uncharted territory, unlike the coronavirus, that we don't know how it's going to be after the lockdown, what lies ahead for us. And of course, the other countries, we see how they are dealing with, and it does give us some sense, but essentially it is uncharted territory. But Permanent Commission for Women Officers in the Indian Army was not really uncharted territory. Because women officers had been serving as officers of the Indian Army since the year 1992. So it had been almost 3 decades that when Supreme Court was considering the matter, there were enough examples of women who had performed in an exemplary manner, women who had displayed courage under fire. And, it's not for everybody's cup of tea to become a Fauji. It's not for everyone to be in the service of the nation as a soldier in the armed forces. It's not everybody's cup of tea for men also. It is not everybody's cup of tea for women also. I had the opportunity of interacting with some of these extremely brave women. And, while they were thanking me for the judgment after the judgment came, but in fact, I was full of gratitude for each one of them for having given me the opportunity of representing them, because it was so incredible to be part of that journey. Anyways, we as lawyers, we are role models, we are actors. We actually step into the shoes of our clients when we are urging or contending their cases. I must tell you this one amazing woman that I know. She's now a Colonel Mithali Madhumita. She was a major when a Fedayeen attack happened at the Indian Embassy in Kabul. She's an education officer of the Indian Army. So she had been assigned to Kabul to teach English to the women officers of the Afghan Army, and also gentlemen officers of the Afghan Army, and she was teaching English there. Now, as an education officer, when this Fedayeen attack happened, instead of running away from the eye of the storm, Colonel Mithali Madhumita, Major Mithali Madhumita then, actually ran in the storm of the eye. She was single-handedly responsible for saving dozens of lives. She displayed such incredible valor and courage, and that too under such trying and difficult circumstances, that she became the first woman officer of the Indian Army to be given a gallantry award, Sera Medal. Now, I must also explain that gallantry awards are awards which are not given, in appreciation of work. These are not peacetime awards. These are awards which are given in the wartime, in the times of extreme hostility, in times which are where action is happening. So to be given a gallantry award, and her citation is incredible. We actually annexed her citation for the Honorable Court to see. So the Indian Army itself had recognized, and the government of India had recognized her service as being exemplary, and she was granted that. Of course, she was the first one, but she was not the last one. We saw many firsts after that, and many women breaking the barriers, the so-called barriers that had been made, and they had been performing exemplarily in whatever roles that were assigned to them. I must also tell you, I had the good fortune of some of these women officers informing me. So this one, it's interesting. You wouldn't hear of these stories too much in media, because under the Indian Constitution, the Indian Armed Forces officials, even their fundamental rights can be curtailed in the interest of national security, which is justified, absolutely. So they really can't come to media unless they have clearance from military intelligence. So they can't form associations, they can't they can't speak their mind out, and they can't really, if injustices are being meted out to them, they can only come to the courts of law. Thankfully that they can, but they can't speak. So I must tell you one more very interesting incident. This woman officer was posted in one of the forward posts, and when she reported for duty, she was told that there is no toilet for the ladies there, and they just threw their hands up and said there is no toilets available for the women. And this officer actually stood in Savdan, saluted the superior officer, and informed the superior officer that, sir, this is not lady officer so and so reporting for duty, this is officer so and so reporting for duty, and I don't care for a woman's toilet. The only thing that I will request you is you have to give me permission to bolt the bathroom from inside when I have to use it. So imagine, there is another woman officer. She sent me the messages that she had received from her Jawans. And those Jawans were actually reminiscing about the wonderful times that they had under working under her. Mind you, women were not given commands of the units, but unit is just one formation in the army. Of course, unit is a very important formation. And above the unit, there are, more formations which are at the division level, state level, etc. But below the unit also, there are sub-unit formations which are there in the Indian Army. Now, those sub-unit formations are like companies, platoons, or special assignments, missions, etc. All of these women were, effectively commanding on the basis of their own merit and compatibility. So they were acting as platoon commanders, they were acting as company commanders, and they were acting as commanders in the other assignments that were assigned to them. But so some of these soldiers who had worked under this woman officer had been messaging the woman officer, and she sent me the parts of the chats and the conversation that she had. And of course, the Jawan was from a rustic rural background. That's how most of the Jawans in the Indian Army are. And his messages read, साहब जी, मैं बहुत खुश हूँ साहब जी, आप इस केस में बहुत अच्छा होगे, आपका अच्छा आएगा, और साहब जी आप तड़के सीओ साहब बनोगे साहब जी, और मेरे को साहब जी कभी भी मौका मिलेगा आपके साथ काम करने में, तो मैं जरूर, मेरे लिए बहुत ये मौका होगा कि मैं आपके साथ काम करूं. These were the kind of conversations and chats that were happening between these women officers and the soldiers, the so-called rustic soldiers, who, as per the note of the government, were of that condition that they were from that social background that they could not see a woman being in command. They would not follow discipline orders, and the lady told me, my client told me, that there is no gender discrimination actually with our Jawans. People who we work with, there is no gender discrimination with our colleagues who see us work. They in fact do not even see our gender. That is why they do not even address us as ma'am. They address us as Sabji. It's the same address that they address the gentlemen officers, and it's the same address that is used for the women officers of the Indian Army. How incredible is that? I think these were some of the moments that really moved me, when I was arguing these matters. And it was an incredible experience, a very emotional experience, also a very enriching experience to see that there was really no gender discrimination, where where there was actual functioning, and it was only probably to suit somebody who had taken stand on how the litigation should be fought, and how probably all litigation must be seen to be adversarial without really seeing the merits of it. And it was unfortunate that despite the political decision having been taken, a policy decision having been taken at the highest level in the governance to grant permanent commission to women officers, in its implementation, people who were responsible for implementation had actually chosen to find loopholes and keep them in a couple of more loops. Gratefully and thankfully, the Honorable Supreme Court completely rubbished and demolished all of these misplaced and misconceived reasons and contentions, and very emphatically, very candidly, very vehemently, the Honorable Supreme Court has given that judgment. I'm sure all of you must have, it was reported hugely in media. I'm sure you must have seen, if not the whole judgment, at least some paragraphs of that judgment, which are incredible. There's one paragraph where the Supreme Court, I think it's para 37, which has these women officers who had performed these exemplary in exemplary manner. Their examples are there, and the Honorable Supreme Court, the best thing about that I like about the judgment is that the Honorable Supreme Court says that to raise these contentions, to deny women officers what they have earned after having served for 3 decades. That's why I was saying that we had examples to cite before the court of women officers who had performed for 3 decades. And we're talking about times such as these. I must also remind you of the Balakot strike. It is a very recent strike, so we all know that surgical strike that we are all very proud of as Indian citizens. In the Balakot strike, we all know of Wing Commander Abhinandan, who of course displayed extreme courage under fire again, and valor and bravery. But there is another person, Squadron Leader Minty Agarwal, who was the flight controller of the dogfights that were happening for the Balakot strike, including the aeroplane of Wing Commander Abhinandan. And her services were also recognized by, again, a gallantry award, which is Yuddha Seva Medal, because she's an Air Force officer. It was a Yuddha Sena Medal that was given to her in recognition of the extreme courage that she had displayed. And the warfare is changing. Warfare is not the same anymore. It's not going to be the same hand-to-hand combat anymore, or it's not going to be the typical traditional kind of warfare that we had seen for decades, etc. But with the changing warfare, we saw that artificial intelligence was playing a very important role. We saw that missiles were taking over. We all saw the kind of strikes that countries like the US have also carried out, even against terrorists in different countries. We saw that it took drone attacks, and it has people who are in the know-how of the warfare. They say that the last of the fighter pilots has already been born. You know how profound that statement is, which means that after probably the lifetime of the current fighter pilots, we wouldn't need to risk our men in uniform for a battle across the borders. The drones will be there, and we will be able to use missiles and drones and artificial intelligence. We all dissuade and discourage our children from playing video games. Of course, in the lockdown period now, we are saying that our children are occupying their gaming consoles even more. But come to think of it, the flight controllers, artificial intelligence, drone controlling, This is nothing, it's pretty much alike and akin to playing with that remote. Only thing is they're not playing games. They are in actual warfare. They are in actual combat, but remotely. So you don't have to be across the line of fire. Because another argument that was raised that the country will not be able to take it if a woman combatant is taken as a prisoner of war. We all know the kind of neighbors that we have been blessed with. Even in the time of extreme pandemic that we are seeing now, the action has completely, it has even become aggravated. And we have seen how one particular neighbor of ours has been working in complete contradiction and complete dereliction of the norms, the laws and the international protocols that have been set up for conflicts and wars. And we have seen that we have, some of the unfortunately some of the bodies that we got of our officers in action were so gory that the country was outraged. So this argument was also raised. Of course, it's a very emotional argument to make. But what needs to be understood is that the question in these cases was not about opening all combat zones for women. The question in this case was where women are taken as short service commissioned officers, where they have been working for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. There you can't deny them permanent commission. So, and actually, in the service that we saw for the last 3 decades, women officers had been posted in forward areas because, you may not keep women in the combat, but women engineers, actually, before even the infantry, engineers are the ones who are going ahead and actually laying down those minefields or looking at the ground for minefields. There are, the army, the military forces work in extremely different circumstances, extremely different environments. I was mentioning earlier that, it's not everyone's cup of tea. Even for men, it's not everyone's cup of tea, even for women. But some of these women who had been there and who had displayed such courage and such valor could not have been shut out from even having the option of exercising their option for permanent commission. So it was a huge success. We cited a lot of international judgments and international journeys, how it had been. In fact, there were cases where similar kind of grounds were raised before the Israel Supreme Court, saying that, we don't have enough infrastructure to train women also. Now, mind you, Israel has conscription for all its citizens, and it is surrounded by hostile countries all around. But even Israel, did make that audacious argument that they don't have enough infrastructure, and the court rejected that. They said it can't be the gender cannot be a disqualification. Merit should be the qualification and disqualification. A deserving man and a deserving woman should both be on an equal footing for what they deserve. You can't say that women as a class will not be given. Interestingly, we found that even in the United States Supreme Court, arguments had been raised in some of these matters where, it was said that taking orders from a woman, heavens forbid. That's the phrase that was being used. And it was completely shut out, in a very effective manner by the courts of that country also. And of course, then they opened more. The only difference was that these battles were fought in these countries in the courts of law, 2 or 3 decades back. These battles were fought in the 70s, in the 80s, and in the 90s. And it was unfortunate that extremely brave women officers of the Indian Army had to fight this battle right up to 2020 in the Indian Supreme Court. But it is heartening to know that we got the judgment that we got. I for one, and I'm extremely proud and privileged to be part of that journey. I'm deeply humbled to have got this opportunity. Now let me take you to the naval matters. Now, see, the Navy matters were slightly different. The battle again was for permanent commission, but the naval matters were taken up subsequently. The judgment was reserved. That case is called Annie Nagaraj, Union of India versus Annie Nagaraj. Now, those judgments, what Navy did was Navy actually granted permanent commission to women officers in 2006. But what they did was that they applied it prospectively. So they said that this option of opting for permanent commission will not be available to women officers who had been commissioned prior to 2006. So all serving officers as on 2006 were excluded from the grant of permanent commission. Now, interestingly, the manner in which the Navy justified it, of course, Navy had gotten wiser. They saw, we already, by the time the naval matters were taken up for hearing, we already had the judgment of Babita Punia in the army matters. So everyone had seen the manner in which the arguments were made, the manner in which that judgment completely demolished those arguments, and a huge media presence also for this judgment was there. And in fact, the media presence was not just in India. I as a lawyer got calls from Germany, from Australia, from France, from Bangladesh. It was incredible, the length and breadth from which I got a call from media across the world. It was very clear that this was a journey that was not just a journey of the women officers of the Indian Army, but it was a monumental journey and a path-breaking judgment, actually, for battle and the journey of gender equality and gender justice across the world. It's rather very interesting that it's not just pandemics like Corona, COVID-19 that connect us and integrate us as humanity. When it comes to, well, some of you may say I'm overgeneralizing, but my opinion and my experience has been that when it comes to some of these reasons that are given to deny equal opportunities to women in different walks and different areas, you hear the same kind of arguments across the world. The countries may change, the constitutions may change, the jurisdictions change, geographies are different, cultures are different, languages are different, but there is an uncanny resemblance in the kind of reasonings and the kind of arguments that are being raised to deny women something that they legitimately deserve. So having shared my experience, you're welcome to have your perspective with your experience, but I thought I will share with you my perspective. I'm not generalizing. I am not somebody who who says that it should be men versus women. It has to be men and women. We complement each other. We can't have families without men and women both. We can't have communities and societies without men and women both. We can't have nations without men and women both. We can't have humanity without men and women both. But I think what is important for us to really note is that, we can't have one half of our population in the family, in the society, in the nation, as also the humanity. We can't have one half of our population scared of their safety, concerned for their well-being in the public spaces, scared to go out there and contribute in the manner that they are capable of contributing. I'm not saying that every woman or every girl will go out and become want to join the army. We have seen women who are in all walks of life. Women have proven to be exemplary examples in almost all walks of life, whether it is judiciary, whether it is politics, whether it is astronauts in the space, outer space, in the police roles, everywhere, right from a daughter, a mother, a sister, to these incredible important roles in the society. But they are not in the proportion of the population that they are. It's not that every woman should go and become a woman officer in the Indian Army, but the girl should be able to realize her potential. She should be able to contribute to the best of her capacity, her merit, her suitability, and she should be able to, Swami Vivekanand ji had said in very telling words. He said, men and women are like two wings of a bird. And if one wing is healthy, but the other wing is not healthy, then the bird, if at all it can take a flight, that flight will not be a stable flight. It will not be a flight with equilibrium. It will not be a flight that it is capable of flying with both healthy wings. So that is the manner that I understand, and I would urge all of my colleagues to understand the issues of gender justice to be. Now, coming back to the naval case, I know I can't see any of you. Of course, I have some messages that are popping up in between, but this is unlike all the other interactions that we have had. But I can see the watch on my laptop. I think I'm 10 minutes short of an hour, and I thought I will make it about 45 minutes, so to make it a little interactive also. But let me just quickly sum up in the next 5-7 minutes about the Navy matter. Of course, I don't need to take you to that expanse or in the Navy matter, because the Navy matter essentially follows the precedent that has been set in the Army matter in the Babita Punia's judgment. But what was very interesting and very strikingly different in the Navy matters, like I was mentioning, was that Navy said that 2006 onwards, we are having women officers as permanent commission officers. We will enroll them, commission them directly as women officers. But existing women officers, serving women officers who have been commissioned prior to 2006 will not be given this option of permanent commission. Now, interestingly, this policy, this notification also came to be implemented much after 2008. So it actually became after 2008. Now, Navy had become wiser by the time their matter came up for hearing. Like I was mentioning, they did not give the same completely lame excuses that were given on the part of for Army, like biological reasons, motherhood, and physiological and physical capability, etc. They actually had some ingenious arguments. So they went on to argue before the Honorable Court that the Navy was not actually having any kind of gender discrimination at all, because Navy does not allow even gentlemen officers to transition from short service to permanent commission officers. And because men and women officers both are not given the option of switching from short service to permanent commission, therefore there is no gender justice. This is a policy decision. It equally applies to men and women both, and therefore there is no gender discrimination, and this should be interfered with. Again, the union was in appeal in these matters. They had succeeded before the Delhi High Court, as also the Armed Forces Tribunal. They were essentially two major judgments that in the Navy matters that the court was dealing with. It was the same bench of Honorable Justice Chandrachud and Honorable Justice Ajay Rastogi, and they heard the matter. And the arguments on our side, we were a whole bunch of lawyers, and the arguments on our side were that you can't see it in a completely black and white sense, that because it's the same thing that is available to men and women both, therefore there is no gender discrimination. In fact, the Supreme Court of India had actually laid down, imported actually from the US Supreme Court the cause and effect. So it was not really looking at just the face of the legislation or the policy to see whether the policy was discriminatory. There was very interesting term that was used in some of the earlier judgments, of course in different contexts, but that term was facially neutral legislation. Now, facially neutral legislation is that legislation which on the face of it appears to be neutral. So you think it's neutral, like the Navy was saying that we're not giving to men, we're not giving to women, so there's no gender discrimination. But you have to dig a little deeper. You have to actually not get swayed by the face of it, but you have to see what is the cause of it, what is the effect of it, what is the implication of it. And those kind of policies or legislations or government orders or notifications, which may appear to be facially neutral, if they are causing discrimination, then they are arbitrary and discriminatory and in the face of the constitutional principles, and cannot be allowed to stand. Now, that argument is the argument, again, in this case also the court took examples of women officers of the Indian Navy who had performed exemplarily well for the last 3 decades. Their experience, the court also dug in from the Babita Punia's judgment of the Indian Army. The court used extremely brilliant, words to say that you cannot have these kind of excuses, and you can't, in today's date and time, when women have performed so well for almost 3 decades in the armed forces in extremely telling and difficult circumstances, then if you are today trying to deny them permanent commission, then it is actually doing, it's actually not just in the face of the constitutional guarantees, but it is also doing grave injustice. It is an assault to those brave women officers and their male colleagues, their compatriots, their colleagues, the soldiers that they have worked shoulder to shoulder with in all these years, and they have performed exceedingly well. The Navy judgment also, it came as expected. It was a brilliant judgment, which actually took it a little forward. In the Navy judgment, what had happened was that while in the army, the women officers who had retired while the matter was pending before the Delhi High Court had been reinstated by the Delhi High Court, and that was not the Honorable Supreme Court had not passed an interim order taking that away. Like I mentioned, they had only stayed the contempt. So those women had been reinstated. But in the naval matters, those women officers of the Navy who could not be reinstated because there was an interim order that was actually the court granted, the Honorable Supreme Court granted at the time of the admission of the matters, and those naval women officers could not be reinstated. So those 5 women officers who could not be reinstated despite having succeeded from the High Court and the Armed Forces Tribunal were given exemplary compensation of 25 lakh rupees each. I think it was again very important for court to do that, because if the court had not done that, then they would have gotten into a disadvantage because of the order of the court, because the stay was there by the court, and that's why they could not be reinstated. So that was essentially the journey of naval officers in the Indian Navy. Of course, the matter of the Air Force officers of the Indian Air Force are still being heard before this lockdown. The court actually said that, would you like us to give a judgment on this, or would you like to take the cue from the earlier 2 judgments and do something yourself? So let's hope that we have something good coming from it. We already have 2 exemplary judgments, and I will commend to each one of you to see at least those last paragraphs of the reasoning of the judgment. I think what I feel is, this is not a journey for women in the armed forces alone. This is not a journey for women in uniform alone. I think this is a very important and very a path-breaking judgment. And you and I arguing something is different. Sorry. But when the Indian Supreme Court says something in such emphatic terms, that has a huge resonating impact. In fact, I was lucky to be in the audience during that international conference that happened soon after, I think 2 or 3 weeks after the judgment. And we had judges from, I think, 22 countries. It was a great initiative by the Supreme Court of India for exchange of ideas by the judges from across the world. We had the president of the UK Supreme Court. We had the first woman Chief Justice from Australia. We had, judges from across the world. And many of them had mentioned this judgment in their speeches, including the President of India and the Prime Minister of India. And it was clear that this was not one judgment that was just important for the legal scholars, I think, and the petitioners. I think this the magnitude of this resonating impact shows that this judgment is important for the journey of families, of societies, nations, and maybe the whole humanity. So thank you very much. I think I'll wind up, and we can take some question answers like Ankita ji was mentioning earlier. Thank you for hearing me with patience, Ankita ji. I hope I did manage to make some points.
Thank you, ma'am. अपने कर्तव्यों संग नारी भर रही है अब उड़ान, ना है कोई शिकायत ना कोई थकान, यही है नारी की पहचान. Thank you, ma'am, for such a wonderful lecture. And we must salute these officers who sacrifice and still sacrificing their life for our country. Now it's time to take question answer from the viewers. Now our first question is from Apurva Singh. Ma'am, you can just see the question on your screen also. Yes. Is this benefit would open the doors for all women officers for permanent commission across all branches in all three services?
Yes, absolutely, Apurva. I have no doubt that this is going to open doors, which will be which will be very very instructive for women in uniform also. Like your question, see, Indian Air Force has already taken women officers as fighter pilots. So this is a battle that had been going on for since 2004 2005, so a decade and a half. It's the kind of reasoning that was given and the kind of scathing judgment that has come. I think this will have a very very important role to play, even for opening combat roles for women. So these women have performed well. They were sought to be denied what they had rightfully earned. And now I think more right now women are being taken on an experimental basis again in the Indian Air Force as fighter pilots. Indian Navy is now considering sending women to the ships. So submarines, the earlier arguments of that Russian submarines and Russian ships do not have toilets for women, and they do not even have enough, we don't have logistic support to make toilets on these. These are all redundant arguments of the past. These two judgments in quick succession that they have come, they will open doors for equal participation of women in serving the nation. I think that is most important. I again and again highlight that it's not that all women will be jumping to join the military, but women who are there, who want to join, who have what it takes to be a soldier in service of the nation, you cannot clip her wings just because she's a woman.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next question is from Shubhendu Anand. Madam, talking of gender justice, how do you see the lesser representation of women on the bench and also lesser senior designation amongst the women members of the bar?
You're absolutely right to notice that, Shubhendu. We have we have women we can only count on the top of our fingertips as they speak, who have been on the judiciary in the Supreme Court, and even designations by the Honorable Supreme Court. In fact, when I got designated last year, I was surprised to note that Indian Supreme Court has only designated 12 women lawyers as senior advocates so far in the last 70 years since its inception. So it is very, very crying numbers, but it is, it's, when you talk about the higher levels, the higher judiciary, the designations, it cannot happen overnight. We have to have a systemic change. Women who were ahead of us in judiciary have Justice Indu Malhotra was the first woman to be designated as a senior advocate by the Honorable Supreme Court. And look at how she has performed, how she has become the first woman to go across from the bar to the bench directly in the Supreme Court. And now, thankfully for us, there are more women lawyers, judges in the high courts, and that we can see. There is more enthusiasm. I think this is a socio-legal issue. It's not really a completely legal issue. More women have to be there. They have to be in the system. They have to rise their way up in the system. You can't have women paratrooping from the top saying that, oh, because I'm a woman and there is less representation, therefore I should be given. No. Even if there is less representation, women have to work their way up. They have to gain that experience, that wisdom, that maturity in the system that is necessary for them to perform at those levels. And now with more and more women lawyers at all levels in our judiciary, and women judges at all levels in our judiciary, right from the lower judiciary to high courts and even Supreme Court. I mean, we live in unique times. Never before has the Supreme Court had 3 sitting women judges at one time. So things are changing slowly but surely.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next question is from Bharat Raya Durgam. His question is that any view on All India Judicial Services, it come into force, what will happen to JAG entry scheme in army forces? Will it be applicable to armed force?
So 2 completely different questions Bharatji is asking. My views on the All India Judicial Services are that All India Judicial Services is the need of the hour. It is the crying need of the hour. Though we have a lot of law students who are now passing out of very good law schools and the traditional universities, but we're not able to catch that talent that is actually choosing the legal profession. We're not able to catch and tap into that talent for the bench early enough. So All India Judicial Service, like the All India Administrative Service, Police Service, etc., will actually, I think, will be helpful in making sure that we capture talent which is necessary to come in the judiciary and make the system better. I mean, for all my colleagues are completely aware that our system is dealing and grappling with grave difficulties. I mean, the delays are actually infesting our system like termites, and if we don't do something to mitigate that, or to actually process that, then our system is going to come collapsing down. I use this isolation period to read some good books, and one of those books was of Nani Palkiwala, the Courtroom Geniuses, and some of his other lectures. Courtroom Geniuses is, of course, a book that has been done by Mr. Soli Sorabji and Mr. Arvind Datar, both legal luminaries of great acumen. And there is one thing that one of those lectures from Nani Palkiwala, where he says that as legal community, as lawyers, I think the responsibility is on us even more. That when he says that the justice delivery system was one of the most beautiful systems and most respectful systems that were created by human wit. The goddess of justice in the Roman Empire, the goddess of justice in the Indian sense, how we have seen it is traditionally incredible. But it is up to us now to stop our courts. Slowly our courts are becoming are not cathedrals anymore, but they are becoming casinos. And Mr. Nani Palkiwala quotes somebody to say this in a very scathing line. He doesn't ascribe it to any author, but he says that stopping the courts from becoming casinos instead of cathedrals that they ought to be. Cathedrals are temples. They are still temples of justice. I mean, we still go inside our courtrooms and we see Yato Dharms Tato Jay. That is the motto of the Supreme Court of India. Or Satyamev Jayate. That is the motto, not only our national motto, but the motto of our high courts. So it's important for us to rediscover ourselves. I think it's, this time, the lockdown time, the extreme difficulty that has been inflicted on all of us by this pandemic also throws some great challenges, some great opportunities along with the challenges. I think it is a time for all of us to rediscover ourselves. Maybe we can rediscover our institutions in a manner that we can, take the better part of it and actually do away with the viruses that have been plaguing our system. So a lot needs to be done. Let's hope we can come out of this stronger, better, and able to ensure justice. As stakeholders in the justice delivery system, we have to ensure justice to the common citizen, and this whole paraphernalia exists really for the common citizen of the country.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next question is from Mr. Dr. Vijendra Mahandian. His question is whether this judgment provides any remedy to those SSA female officers who got released from service before its pronouncement, and also whether this judgment is in RAM or persona.
No, the judgment is in rem. It does not apply just to the officers who were there before the court. In fact, the original petitioners from the High Court were only about 10, 12 lady officers who were there, and we had then subsequently, by way of impleadments, brought in some more 50, 60 women officers before the court, so that the court sees that it's not just these 10 lone women. And somewhere when you're in the system, you're litigating, the system also gets vindictive against you. So it was important to add numbers to this case, because it was not a personam case at all. It was universal in application, and not just to the Indian Army, maybe to the world, like I was mentioning. Vijendraji also happens to be my classmate from law school. So thank you, Vijendraji. And the second thing that you asked about the SSC women officers who had already retired. So the women officers who had been there before the Delhi High Court and had retired during the pendency of the petition from 2005 to 2010 had been reinstated, and they had been serving in the Indian Army. But neither in the Navy case nor in the Army case, the courts have not allowed reinstatement for any of the women officers who had retired, or because nobody really needed to retire. If they had gone out, then they had gone out on their own volition or for other reasons, and therefore they will have to fight their own legal battles, if any.
Ma'am, our next question is from Pallavi Avasthi. Very informative session, ma'am. Whether any Nagaraja is applicable on the lady officers who have substantive qualifying service in Navy but got discharged before the pronouncement of this judgment.
Unfortunately, Pallavi ji, that it is not like I was mentioning. It is not this benefit will not avail to any of the women officers who are not serving. In fact, this argument was raised. It was considered at length, but the Honorable Court felt that to bring in women officers who had already retired would not be fair on the forces, and it would have its own set of problems. Therefore, that relief was not granted. But in the Navy matters, compensation of 25 lakh rupees each was granted to those 5 women officers who could not be reinstated because of the Supreme Court judgment.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next question is from Mr. Amit Sharma. As you mentioned, in case of Navy, they have not offered permanent commission to even male officers. So after this judgment, the male officers whose cases are pending in courts also would be granted permanent commission.
So, Amit ji, there was 2 or 3 cases of gentlemen officers which were also there before the Supreme Court when the naval matters were being heard. But the Supreme Court has segregated those matters, and they said we are going to deal with it separately. But if you see the findings in the Annie Nagaraj judgment, it actually applies. It does not restrict it to women officers only. But that judgment per se will not give them the benefit. They will have to. I think there are the pending cases. We will have a judgment on that. But just picking up that grain from there. The reason why we had confined the case to women officers of the Navy was that even prior to 2006, when they opened permanent commission for women for the first time, gentlemen officers always had the option of permanent commission. It was they had both options available to them. They were just choosing. So it was like they had a bigger door and they had a smaller door. So whoever was coming in through the smaller door also had the option of a bigger door. They had just chosen to come in through the smaller door. That was the argument that we had raised. And that is why this matter was actually linked as a gender justice discrimination, because before 2006, actually, till it got implemented in 2008, there was really no option available for permanent commission of women officers at all. Again, in the naval matter also, there were issues with regard to streams which are not open to women. There are lots of streams which continue in the Indian Navy to be open only to gentlemen officers. So the issue was not with regard to opening of those streams. That is a battle for another day or another policy decision. Let's see.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next question is from Mr. Ritvik Saha. The 64 pages judgment also questioned the prospective effect of the policy barring women officer inducted before 2008 from being granted permanent commission in the Navy. What changes will there be now?
So, Ritvik ji, the directions are very clear that all women officers who are serving as short service commission naval women officers will be given the option of opting for permanent commission, and they will be considered and granted permanent commission at par with gentlemen officers.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, before vote of thanks, there was connectivity issue in the beginning. तो हम एक बार फिर हमारे पैट्रन एंड फाउंडिंग मेंबर श्री लाल बहादुर सिंह जी को उनके 92वें जन्म दिवस पर हार्दिक बधाई देते हैं और कामना करते हैं उनके दीर्घायु और अच्छी सेहत की कामना करते हैं और भविष्य में भी उनका मार्गदर्शन मिलता रहे, इसी की हम कामना करते हैं. Thank you, Aishwarya ma'am, for enlighten our knowledge on the topic and to share your experience during the journey of this landmark judgment. And we will keep bothering you in the future also. I'm also thankful to our background team who is really working hard to organize these online lectures. They are putting efforts throughout nights to make it successful. I'm also thankful to our viewers who are watching this series. And in the last, I request everybody to follow the government norms issued to fight COVID-19 and also maintain social distancing and physical distancing and wash your hands regularly. I request everybody to like and subscribe online page at YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. So thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much once again, Aishwarya ma'am. So we will
Thank you.
meet tomorrow at same time, same place with a new speaker on a new topic. Stay tuned. Thank you very much. Namaskar.
Thank you so much, Ankita ji, and everybody.